Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People Story. I've lived in my house for over 15 years now and never had any issues with neighbors or property lines. My house is on a decent amount of land, about 5 acres, so there's plenty of space between me and the neighbors on either side. The property lines are clearly marked, and I've never had any confusion about what belongs to me versus the neighbors. That all changed when the Jones family moved in next door about 6 months ago. Right from the start, Karen Jones rubbed me the wrong way. She just had this attitude about her. Really entitled. Thinks the world revolves around her, and she was always trying to get all up in everyone's business. About a month after they moved in, I was doing some landscaping work in my backyard. I was way back near the line between my property and the Jones land, trimming some trees and clearing out some brush. This was clearly on my side of the property line, well within the boundaries of my land. As I'm working, I notice Karen Jones marching over from her yard. She comes right up to me and says in this snotty tone, "Just what do you think you're doing over here?" I was so confused and just said, landscaping my own yard. And she goes, "This is our land, not yours. You need to leave immediately and stop trespassing on our property." Now I'm really scratching my head because she was clearly mistaken. I've lived here for years and know exactly where my land ends and the Jones begins, but she is adamant that I'm on their property and trespassing. I try to explain nicely that she's mistaken, and even walk over to show her the property markers and where we are in relation to them, but she won't hear it. She keeps insisting this is their land, and that I need to get off our property now before I call the police. At this point, I'm getting annoyed. I firmly tell her again that this is my land. I'm well within my property boundaries, and she is mistaken. I even offer to walk back to the house and show her the official survey and property deeds. But Karen is having none of it. She pulls out her cell phone and loudly announces that she's calling the police to report me for trespassing. I threw my hands up in exasperation and went back to working, figuring eventually she or the cops would realize how ridiculous this was. About 15 minutes later, a police cruiser pulls up. The officer gets out and Karen immediately starts yelling about me trespassing. I calmly greet the officer and explain the situation, that I'm doing work on my own land, well within my property lines. But my new neighbor seems to think it's her land. The officer asks to see our respective property maps and deeds. Of course, mine clearly show where my land ends and the Jones begins. The officer walks the boundary with me and verifies I am well within my own yard. He apologizes for the confusion, thanks me for my patience, and turns to Karen and advises her to be more careful about surveying her property lines before making accusations. Karen turns red, sputtering and trying to insist it's still her land. But the officer shuts her down, saying it's pretty clear she's mistaken. She finally storms off back to her house, as the officer again apologizes to me before leaving. I had hoped that would be the end of it, now that Karen had been set straight about the property lines. But unfortunately, it was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, there were multiple more incidents where Karen accused me of trespassing or encroaching on her property, when I was always clearly on my own land. She called the police several more times, but after coming out and talking to me and seeing my side, they made it clear Karen was in the wrong. It got so frequent that one officer threatened to charge Karen with misuse of police resources if she kept calling them out unnecessarily. That managed to calm things down for about a month. Until this past weekend, that is. I was doing some yard work near the property line, like I've done without incident hundreds of times before. After about an hour, I noticed an unusual amount of police vehicles descending on my property. I walked around to the front yard to see what was going on, only to be met by the sight of 4 cop cars parked in front of my house. Lights flashing, officers standing around talking on their radios. I approached cautiously and asked what was going on. Karen emerged from the middle of the fray, yelling and pointing at me. "That's him! That's the trespasser!" One officer asked if I knew this woman or why she might accuse me of trespassing. I quickly explained about the ongoing disputes over the property lines. The officer looked exasperated and said they had received a call from Karen, alleging a dangerous trespasser on her property and requesting immediate backup. I showed the officers my property map and pointed out exactly where I was working today, well on my side. After scrutinizing the boundaries, they determined this was clearly another false accusation. The lead officer walked over to Karen and I overheard him lecture her about misusing the cop system and wasting precious police resources with her false reports. This time he didn't just threaten. He actually gave her a citation carrying a hefty fine for disorderly conduct and misuse of 911. As the officers dispersed to leave, I heard Karen yelling after them that I had clearly moved the property markers. Yeah, right. And she would be suing the police department for not protecting her rights. The officers mostly just ignored her. I thought about trying to smooth things over with my hostile neighbor, but I quickly realized she was completely irrational and unwilling to accept basic facts. At this point, I decided my best bet is just to document everything meticulously in case this escalates to legal action, and to avoid her as much as humanly possible. I'm also looking into installing security cameras covering my entire property just in case she tries to pull anything else. It's a shame to have to go to these lengths when I've never had an issue with previous neighbors. But Karen has proven herself to be an entirely unreasonable and possibly unstable individual. I can only hope she eventually accepts reality and leaves me alone to enjoy my own land in peace. The next one is a pro-revenge story. So this happened about 3 years ago and figured it would make a good revenge story. I met a guy while vacationing in California one summer. Really nice guy, and he always wanted to do something fun and different every day. From hiking, paintballing, swimming, or going out on the ocean. After the vacation ended, we kept in touch, and over the course of the next year we decided I would move to California. I work in healthcare as a nurse, so getting a job almost anywhere isn't tough. Just as the new nurse, your hours are going to be crappy. No surprise, so after we've lived together for a few months and my hours being terrible, they go back to normal hours and we can really spend more time together. I'm not really one to snoop around. He had a safe in the bedroom where we kept basic safe stuff like passports, SS cards, birth certificates, etc. One day I had to produce my birth certificate and had to go into the safe while he wasn't home. I found my birth certificate easily, but next to it was a birth certificate with an entirely different name and DOB than what his was. So I asked him about it and he got super defensive and yelled at me for snooping. Totally out of character for him, as I've never seen him yell before. I still wanted to know WTF, and based on his reaction and the fact I moved to a different state to be with him, I deserved to know if he was hiding anything. A few days later, he finally tells me the truth. He used to be married and had twins. This caught me off guard because normally you tell someone you are in a relationship with if you have kids. That doesn't bother me as much as him using a different name than what his real name is. So he decides this is the time to be totally honest with me. Tells me he didn't want to pay child support or alimony because she was cheating on him, but he couldn't prove it in court and he believed the kids weren't his, even though he also admitted they did a paternity test and he's the father. So he simply started using his old friend's name and information that he for some reason had after they were college roommates. So many red flags are now flying. Why did he have his roommate's birth certificate and social? He never did answer that, and Googling the name never did turn anything up. Then he decided to admit he's been cheating on me ever since I moved out here, since we are being honest. And he finally could share his life with someone. WTF. So I moved out that very night to sleep on another nurse's couch. He, however, refused to leave me alone and eventually started to threaten me over the phone. Big mistake, you just admitted to skipping out on child support, alimony, court orders, and identity theft. I started looking up his hometown and state, one thing he didn't seem to lie about, and found public records of his divorce and tracked down his ex-wife on Facebook. After she finally responded about a week later, she confirmed from pictures it was him, and was really interested in knowing where he was. Turns out he not only skipped out on child support and alimony, but he also stole her car years ago when he left and opened several credit cards in her name before he decided to leave town and was wanted for all of that. I mildly kept in touch with him, telling him I needed time to figure it all out before we could try again. About 2 months later, he was arrested, and began proceedings to get him transported back to his home state. He did call me from jail for about a week, but I refused to pay for the calls. He then had his attorney contact me, and I told his attorney that if he ever contacted me again, I'd call the cops for harassment. I then started searching his name and everything through his home state's court access site, and found out he was sentenced to 6 years for the credit cards, motor vehicle theft, theft of a firearm, and several contempt of court charges. I kept in contact with the ex-wife for a bit. She was thankful they finally found him. Also, for a bit more on top, it turns out once he gets out of prison in his home state, he will arrested and charged for the stuff that they uncovered and figured out in California over the past few years. Turns out he also did a good amount of credit card fraud out there. So don't threaten to smash someone's face in for breaking up with you if you are committing identity theft and are on the run from child support. The next one is a petty revenge story. Neighbor's son Garth graduated college about this time last year and got his first full-time career job at a company. He's in the IT department of a branch office and does IT things. Total number of employees at this office is around 20. Some are sales, some work in the office. Karen is the office manager. When Garth first started, there were 3 IT people. They had an office in the basement away from the rest of the employees. This suited Garth just fine. He's a quiet, introverted young man. Highly intelligent, but he's not a social person. Would rather spend his time off gaming than live interaction. As you can imagine, he's not a big kid. Maybe $1.50 after eating a big steak for dinner. The other 2 IT people eventually move on to other jobs and corporate doesn't replace them. Now Garth has 3 times the work without receiving a raise. Garth voices his concerns to Karen about workload and call-outs, and he gets the standard feeble corporate responses and condescending lecture. I don't know why he didn't quit then, but he stuck it out, hoping to eventually be recognized for his worth, etc. Whenever I spoke with him, he'd say how bad it was working for Karen. But his saving grace was he was in his solitary office most of the day, and did not have to have much contact with her. Until one day back in February. He got a phone call from Karen telling him to come upstairs. Upon arriving, he's directed to start moving furniture around. Garth takes a look around and tells Karen his job does not call for moving heavy objects. Karen gets loud and calls his manhood into question in front of everyone, but Garth does not budge. Life changed for Garth after that. Karen had decided to make work miserable for him. She started repeatedly writing him up for whatever she could think up. Here comes the petty revenge. Garth starts snooping and discovers that Karen is having an affair with a married co-worker. Their work phones are synced up to the computer system which Garth has access to. Garth has created a mass corporate email with various screenshots of the sexting. He rigged it to be sent out today, from her own email account. The beauty of it all. Garth walked in Friday and tendered his resignation to corporate HR. He left his ID card and whatever else on Karen's desk. Karen made a big deal of shouting to Garth as he was leaving to not let the door hit him in the ass on the way out. When the email is sent out, they may well suspect that Garth was the perpetrator, but they'll never be able to prove it. I can only hope Garth's revenge is sweet and spectacular. The next one is a malicious compliance story. 3 years ago, I was working in a popular local cafe in the middle of a big city. Obviously, there were a lot of customers during rush hours, and of course the usual Karens. At the time of this story, I was just finishing my training to be fully hired. The manager, Steve, was an utterly obnoxious person who was overall very disturbing. He'd tell us to do something, then change his mind while we were halfway through it. Anyways, he wasn't exactly competent, but we were low on staff, and the owner desperately needed a manager. So this one day I'm just clocking in, and I see my first clients are a bunch of kids, and their Karen of a mom. Yes, she had the haircut. The following conversation ensued. Karen, what are your muffin flavors? Me. We have naming all the muffin flavors. Karen, interrupting me. No, I'll just take one of those special edition muffins. Points to the back of the kitchen, like she's expecting me to make them for her. Me. Oh, sorry. Those are limited edition muffins. We don't have them anymore. Karen, rolling her eyes. Yeah, I know. Just give me 5 of them. Me, a bit louder, thinking she didn't hear me. We don't have those anymore, ma'am. I'm sorry. Karen, just give me them. What's wrong with you? Get me your manager. Now at this point I'm pretty pissed because this woman is screaming at me at the top of her lungs and gathering all the attention towards her. So I do as she asked and get her the manager. Steve looks mad as soon as I disturb him. He goes to see the Karen and comes back to me. Steve, just give her the muffins now. Me, we don't have any of those muffins left. I already explained that to her. Steve, there are some left. Just find them. Me, where are they? I'm positive we don't have any left. Steve, I don't care about your opinion. Just find them already. Ask others to help you find them if you're that dumb. And don't go back to that lady or any other clients until you find those muffins. Me, thinking about what he just said. Okay, sir, I'll give her the muffins. Steve, that's better. So I go and try to find them everywhere in the store. Of course, there is none left as the muffins are seasonal items, and since none arrived in stock, there is no special edition muffins left. QMC. Since Steve told me to not go back to that lady or any other clients until I found the muffins, I do exactly that. Since he also told me to ask others for help, I make sure to let every employee know my desperate need for help in finding the muffins. In the end, since no one likes Steve anyways, we all went searching for the muffins. For several hours, clients kept pouring in until one of them dared to ask what we were all doing running around. I calmly explained that our manager sent us searching for something and we couldn't work until we found it. I insisted that our hands were tied and we couldn't serve them until our manager said so. Every single client went banging on Steve's door demanding to talk to him. As soon as he opened the door, everyone started yelling at him to let the employees serve them. Visibly confused by so much people in the cafe and in front of him, he shouted my name. I wasn't allowed to stop searching, so I replied by yelling back too. He eventually came in front of me and asked me what the duck was going on. The following conversation was priceless. Me: "Oh, I was just searching for the muffins." Steve, looking like he was about to pass out: "What? Why?" Me: "Well, you asked me to find them and to get help if needed. You insisted I shouldn't go serve anyone until I find them. Since we never found them, we never got to work again." Steve, realizing he just lost hours of profits: "Seriously? Go back to work now." Me, with a smug on my face: "But we didn't find the muffins yet, sir. Would you like to search with us?" Steve went ballistic on me, saying this was insubordination, that I had the IQ of a slug, etc. Meanwhile, the Karen sent multiple complaints to the owner about the manager. At the end of the day, the owner personally came in to announce to Steve he was fired and replaced by one of my co-workers. We never had any other seasonal muffins after that. The next one is an entitled People Story. So he's trying to turn this around on me, which I knew he was. He says he's disappointed in me. His mom is a hoarder, and I've spent the last week throwing stuff away just for her to be passive-aggressive. Update: now he's trying to say he's sorry, that he didn't realize that's how I looked at the situation, blah blah blah. He said he offered to go with his mom. WTF. He didn't come home early or even take a day off until my mom had been gone almost a month. So my mom, 57, I'm F25, passed away last April, rather unexpectedly. I'm upset, so please be warned. When my mom died, I grieved alone. My husband nor my in-laws could take time off work, or so they said. I had to view my mother's body alone because my husband said he couldn't leave his employees in charge of a disinter/re-enter. That's just fancy language in the funeral industry for having to redo a service for whatever reason. His employees have since said that they would have gladly taken over so he could have went with me, but he didn't want to leave. My mill mom got sick less than a month after my mom passed, and all that was dumped on me. Nobody seemed to remember I was grieving. My mill's uncle, so my husband's great uncle, passed away this past weekend. My husband called earlier this morning to tell me he was going to drive an hour home from work and then drive 2+ hours to take his mom to the viewing at 6 p.m. Then get home at God knows what time. I blew up. I told him to duck off and leave me alone. Anytime I say anything, I get told the situations aren't comparable or it's different. I don't see how. Nobody cared about me last year. He only said he wasn't going when I told him fine, go. But your clothes are in closet, you can get them yourself. He's a man baby who can't find something even if it's right in front of his face. I don't think I'm wrong here. The next one is an entitled Parent Story. I've, 21M, been in a surprisingly successful relationship for the past year and a half, ever since I moved to Europe to start my studies. Honestly didn't think I'd hold it together this long, but hey, the girl actually likes me. Shocker. She's honestly perfect. Spiritually, she is a neckbeard, and I love her for it. My parents, not so much. Not because of her personality, they don't care about little things like that. She's European, and that's the problem. My parents belong to a minority in the Middle East. We believe in a lot of things, but the kicker is that if you marry outside your faith, you get excommunicated, disowned, not allowed back in the village, the whole shazam. And since there's so little of us, privileges are handed out so that finding the love of your life would still be possible. Dude down the street assaulted a child. It's fine. We'll just introduce my daughter to him. I'm sure he's a good man. Son fell in love with your niece? It's fine. Matters of the heart are complicated. Your daughter fell in love with an Englishman after 8 years of living in England. Burn her at the stake. I feel like my mom genuinely thought that I was going to move back home to the village and meet someone there, like she and her siblings did. But surprise, surprise, I wasn't a fan of it. Especially since her siblings consist of her sister, who married a man 20 years younger than her, her brother who married his cousin, and her other brother, who's on his third marriage, with a woman who can only be described as a vanilla-flavored biscuit. Ever since I got into a relationship, my parents have been relatively supportive. I feel like my mom was just glad I'm not gay, since I wasn't like the other boys in high school. And my dad, in true dad fashion, was just happy I was getting some. 1.5 years later, they started showing their concern. My dad regularly sits me down for talks about our heritage, and my mom regularly jokes about setting me up with my future bride. Whenever I bring up something remotely serious about my girlfriend, they get visibly upset. I'm in a position right now where I possibly have to move cities. The fact that I want to stay where I am because I'm not exactly enthusiastic about leaving my girlfriend and the life I've built here caused them to short circuit. All of a sudden, my poor academic performance wasn't due to my many mental health problems, or COVID, or just my lack of interest in the subject. It was the witch. The witch who seduced me and led me astray, because their golden boy is definitely incapable of making poor decisions himself. So yeah, it got to a point where they're trying their hardest to force me to move cities just to get away from my girlfriend. They're arguing about it every phone call now, and if I just give it time, they're going to add the financial pressure on top of that. That's fun. I just really hope they mellow out soon, if not for me, for my siblings' sakes. I'm the oldest, so I get the brunt of the generational friction, but I only hope it gets better when they get older. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.